Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first panel discussion for SCCS 2022. This panel discussion is on the role of theatre in conservation, and we have Sangeeta Iswaran with us, who will moderate today's panel discussion, and our very, very esteemed panelists, Abhisheka, Vikram, and Sriharsha. And I hand it over to you, Sangeeta.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. And yeah, really excited to hear this discussion. So in the last decade, community theater, community art has developed, much more legitimacy. And I just attended several conferences of the International Teaching Artists Network, of community dancing, of people dancing. These are all networks that coordinate artists that work in the field of community, that work in community work, climate justice, education, empowerment. And this has gained a lot of traction. And somehow in the world of conservation, we don't really hear about projects that use the arts, theater, music, performance, visual arts for the cause and the need for it in conservation. So this is the first time I've heard of such a panel. I'm super thrilled to be here, and also really thrilled to be introducing our beautiful panelists today. So I'm going to go straight to it so that we can hear about what they do and see if there are different conversations that can develop around it in the future. So we have Vikram Sridhar, and Vikram Sridhar is a performer. He's a storyteller who believes in the art of Desi storytelling to link stories from nature in his work in education and conservation. And he has combined his various interests and worked over 20 years as a theatre practitioner in the realm of conservation and social work as well. And while he has a engineering and management degree from institutions like IIT, he has now moved to be a full-time arts practitioner, and that's so lovely to hear. And I really would love to hear from him how he would use myths, folklore, and legends inspired by various communities of the soil. And then we have Abhisheka Krishna Gopal. And Abhisheka combines her interests in and experience in wildlife rehabilitation and field research, as well as the medium of art, to communicate ecology, to bridge the gap between public and the scientific community. And that is such an important gap to be bridged. Sriharsha G is a Bangalore-based theatre artist and also a software engineer by profession. But he has worked on various theatre productions in Kannada, English, and Hindi. And I think Sriharsha and Abhisheka actually worked together on the play, The Big Indian Paper Family, based on Dr. Chandrasekhar's work on the paper wasp. So it sounds really fascinating. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what all of you have to say about using theatre and actually, I would say, any form of art in conservation. So I would like to ask maybe each one of you to introduce yourself and talk about this work that you do and put it in context for us, So Vikram, could you start? Is that okay?
Sure. Thanks, Sangeeta. Hi, Harsha. Hi, Abhishek. And to all the wonderful listeners of SCCS who are watching us, because I think this panel is about theatre and theatre is about audio and visual. And my name is Vikram, and like the Betal, I tell stories. And like many of us who have grown up, and the moment we think of stories long, long ago, so long ago, we look at our ancient laws. And one of the ancient laws that had the basic ingredient of conservation is our Panchatantra. They say the most translated work in the world is not even the Bible, Quran, and Bhagavad Gita, but it's the Panchatantra. Because wherever you go in the world, from America to Europe to Africa, you'll see stories of flora and fauna are the first ones, and they will say that, oh, these stories come way back in a place in Asia called Hindustan or India in those times. And going a little deeper into that, every time we ask, I used to ask a lot of people saying, give me 5 animals or birds that you've read in school and colleges. And out of 10, 8 would be repetitive. And a country like India, which has a lot of flora and fauna, in vernacular stories and vernacular art forms, folk forms, we find a lot of variety. But when it comes into our academic storytelling, and stories are the first basic level, even to look at even theater as a larger realm. And the theater by itself today is very broad to a lot of public, a lot of people who think theater means only going on stage and performing. Theater today is much larger, because applied theater is what a lot of us do and believe in. And storytelling is my form of applied theater. And with these stories, what I realized is a lot of birds and animals are unknown even to the local children. And also a lot of stereotypes happen, saying that one animal is beautiful, one animal is not beautiful, and which to a larger realm as an adult is the basic ingredient of stereotypes and biases, which means our flora and fauna is the basic ingredient in our childhood literature that leads to a larger gamut of biases and stereotypes as an adult, both in terms of color. Very simple. We ask somebody what's the most beautiful Indian bird. It will be the peacock, but peacock is a male. But what about the peahen? And the moment you say peahen, is that beautiful? We'll get into our own discussion. But that's where I'm begin with. And same thing with certain animals like the buffalo, the hyena, the vultures. But if they're not there, what happens to ecology? So these are questions that I ask myself, saying, can we change these stories? Can we have different versions of these stories? And I started using my learning of theater, saying that just listening is one form, but can I have the children and the audience come and be a part of the performance? For example, this is an image that I can show where you will see that the child is coming and being a part of the story. And when the child comes and is a part of the story, I change the narrative according to the local stories. I mean, can we add a new bird? Can we change new animals, bring in new flora, fauna? And for example, a lot of us don't even know the name of the lake that's behind our buildings. And this is where I started in Chennai and Bangalore. And with theater and storytelling, the audience will not go to sleep. Because a lot of times in performances, I'm sure all of us have sat in darkness, where you will see the performance is going on, but the person next to us will be going to a good sleep. Switch on the light, let them come on stage. And that's the fifth wall that I broke in saying that, okay, I have these two wonderful mediums of theater and stories. Now, how does it go a little deeper into the audience? Instead of telling them, it means bring them as a part of the performance. And in that, bring in new narratives, change new narratives, and leave it there. And that's what I started many years back after my volunteering with animal organizations like Blue Cross, WRRC, and over many years, learning, unlearning. And then, yes, there's a beautiful ape called chimpanzee and gorilla, but we also have the gibbon, which a lot of us sometimes don't have it in our literature. And that's where I started, and that's the work that I do in a larger gamut. That's my 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Vikram. I mean, it's fascinating to hear. Thank you so much for sticking with time. That's such an important thing. I just wanted to add that to add a theater element to our conversation, I'm going to do this when we are running out of time. Okay, so watch out for that sign when you're speaking so that we can all, have a lovely conversation. Abhisheka, would you like to share some of your experience with us?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sangeeta. So I think my entry into the world of theater was, I think, when I was in high school, when I used to be like the nuns in my school used to do a lot of street play in rural Karnataka to bring about awareness about social issues that women face. And we children had the opportunity to volunteer during our summer vacation. So we were part of these street plays, moving from village to village. And I think that is where I saw the power of theater in bringing about, in spreading messages and mobilizing the crowd. So my very first experimentation was way back, I think about 14, 15 years ago, when I first worked in a school in a remote Tamil Nadu village, where I tried to experiment with different art forms. I was using visual arts, and then I worked with the local folk performers, the dancers, to come and work with children to bring back folk art into the village, which was kind of almost disappeared from the landscape. And then also used theater to get children to understand the kind of local biodiversity they have, and the issues that the landscape is facing in terms of environmental the state of environment in that landscape. So I guess but then that is an experience which also taught me that like, for example, when I was using visual art sketching medium, it somehow didn't work with those kids, but then theater was the best form of art. So I though my strong point, because I'm trained as a visual artist, I use a lot of sketching in my nature education programs, but I also try and see if I could collaborate with professionals to work with other art forms. And that's when I also, a few years back at SCCS, we presented the How to Be a Fig dance performance, where I really wanted to communicate an ecological concept through dance. And then last year we had the opportunity to collaborate with Still Space Theatre, and that's when I worked with Sri Harsha to come up with this theatre performance on the paper wars, the social behavior of the paper wars. So that's my journey into using art for conservation.
Thank you so much, Abhisheka. What strikes me with the both of you is how much your childhood experience is feeding into what you do as an adult, and maybe that's one thing that all of you are now doing, is that then passing it on so that more children have that opportunity to tap into, storytelling, visual arts, theater, to translate their experience of the world around them. Lovely. Sri Harsha, take it away.
Thank you, Sangeeta. So let me, for me, I will start my journey, telling about my journey when I was a kid, because that's what we are talking about. How do we use theater as an applied art to have fun, to bring about or fill the gap between the heavy science and the lighter art. So I will start. My theater journey basically started when I just passed out of my 10th, and I was in a very good college, and I was not a very studious guy. I was like like this odd man in the classroom, not scoring well. Suddenly, one day there was an announcement that there will be a theater workshop followed by a production. And that was the chance, that was the moment I wanted to get out of the class, and I just stood up, and that's when I started my theater journey. Theater for me, from then on, though it's always been an amateur, or I have never been a full-time theater artist. Theater has always been a place where I connect with other people. I'm rooted. I connect with the stories. I connect with my own story, and I get to tell my story. I get to tell others' story. I get to share the space with people. So that's been theater for me, and I've been very fortunate to have worked with a lot of very good theater practitioners, and also explore different forms. We are recently working on a form called clowning, I have got trained in a folk form called Yakshagana, for example, Bharatanatyam, so on and so forth. So a lot of it gave me a lot of introduction on how traditionally these art forms have been passed on in our culture, and how people have learned it, and how stories are told through these forms, and why do we need these forms. So that has been a fascinating experience for me. And I have also watched a few plays which talk about science. in English, Kannada. I speak Kannada at home, so I have watched plays in both languages, and I mean, every time I have watched a play which talks about science, I have slipped off, like Vikram said, because I don't know. It's as soon as the word science comes in, it has to have a lot of jargon. It has to have a lot of concepts. It has to have a lot of people only smart enough can understand and all that. So I have always wondered, but I am fascinated with science, honestly. I have been fascinated with science, not just because of the concepts that it brings across, but also because of the consequence of something because of which it even exists, and the background, why something like that happened. So all that, I feel that we have to really look at science holistically. Very coincidentally, I was reading Peter Brook's book yesterday. I started reading it, his foreword, and he says, in our times, the tragedy of art is it lacks science, and the tragedy of science is it lacks heart. So that is where I got fascinated when Abhisheka came, and she offered, or she proposed that we should do something about this, and about this scientist, play about this scientist, and what he explored, and what he got fascinated with. And it's been a fascinating journey for me until now, and I'm sure it opened up a lot of things for me, and in future something, it can transform into something different, from what we have all seen, what we have all learned as children, and work with children more and have fun. That's my introduction.
Thank you so much, Sriharsha. In my work using the arts, mainly dance and theatre, in not just conservation, but for other social causes and social justice, I find that one of the most fascinating things about the work I do is as an artist and a communicator, because art is essentially a form of empathetic communication, according to me. As an artist and communicator, we are able to bring multiple stakeholders to the table. And if we are really good, we are able to bring in an inclusive atmosphere among the stakeholders, which is not always true in India, given our huge hierarchies, caste, ethnic, rural, urban divide, and so on and so forth. And we know that the field of conservation has huge challenges, right? How do you feel theatre can contribute to it? Because I think, in a sense, we're all talking about storytelling. We're talking about telling stories of the earth, and we're talking about communicating these stories in a manner that touches the audience and wants them to take the story for themselves and then weave themselves into that story, right? But we are also looking at conservation with the goals of whatever nature education has, the goals of what community conservation has. How do you feel theatre can tap into achieving those goals, right? And what do you feel are the challenges that this very complex field poses? Anything from your experience that you could share with us? Do you want to follow the same, Vikram, or anybody just can pop up and speak?
Sure, I'll begin. So I'll divide into three parts. One is folklore, heritage, and conservation. These three, a lot of times, is ingrained in a cultural rootedness. But over time, we've started running a little more faster than the previous generations. And in doing that, a lot of time, our practices have just changed drastically in a generation or two, to an extent where conservation was there in a lot of our practices. I mean, it could be in simple habit of eating in a banana leaf, for example. Starting from there, and today we move into having 5 plates per person, or 6 plates, or maybe 3 tumblers or 2 tumblers. I mean, the first idea of conservation in using art in any form is to tap a memory of a person and to pause. and to question our practices and not be judgmental at any point. And that's where theater and any form of arts in my journey has to say that, okay, I'm going on a journey. Can I pause and look around me and ask, what do I take forward? What do I leave behind? What has come along with me, which needs a certain amount of questioning, and which is where is heritage coming into place. Folklore in parts could be our habits around us. It could be the way that we meet as human beings, as families, and have certain practices. I mean, in that way, like something like theater and storytelling applied, we just need a space. We don't even need anything. I mean, and we have a luxury of space. So that's why a lot of times, even classrooms or even public, I mean, today we say we have a problem sitting down, we need a chair. And that's conservation. So conservation doesn't mean at a lot of extent to look at habitat loss, but do look at our practices itself. There's a lot of conservation that we're doing. And that it's where I think theater, storytelling, and any art, I mean, whatever arts that we pursue is to do that. The challenge is, because, I mean, the other extreme is the non-human intervention where technology is taking a lot of our and we are running. I mean, for example, the last 2 generations, we've run much faster than the previous 3 generations. I mean, many generations, just an example. And in that running, we seldom have a thought process that it's possible to pause and to look back. For example, A for apple. Why should a child in southern India say A for apple? And that change takes time, because we believe that A is only apple and cannot be anything else. It can't be an ant, and it can't be like S for sambar, for example. And that's where is the change taking time, because we have to run, because from A, we have to move very fast to B, but can you just pause and look around A for a little longer time and have many other choices for A, and saying that we can be pluralistic. I pause there.
Thank you so much. I love that. Can we hit the pause button and take a, in one of our memories and, live it once again? It's just beautiful. Thank you so much. Abhisheka, anything from your experience?
For me, what happens is because I've been part of conservation organizations, and we are constantly hearing about climate crisis, and I mean, there is this thing of fear that, okay, we need to act fast before it's too late. And we also know that, we need people's support to, fight against whatever is happening in terms of environmental destruction now. But then the number of people that we are able to reach out to as part of conservation organizations is very tiny compared to our global population. And but then we also know, on the other hand, there are tools like, theater has proved for decades how it's like, mobilize communities for both social, political, issues. But still, somewhere in the conservation sector, though we know that theater has the ability to pull the crowd and ability to, make people feel, we've still not, there are very, very few organizations or individuals who work with theater in taking it to the public. We still haven't tapped it enough. Somewhere I feel, so we do know that art is a very good communication tool to reach out to the public, also to get people to feel and think. When it comes to somehow collaborating with artists, we still hesitate a lot. We still, somewhere artists become like a minor part of our big conservation project. And many a times we don't, we just ask artists to volunteer for us and not really treat them on par with the other professionals in the field. So so I feel it's very important. It's high time that we have many more collaborations to take conservation message to the masses.
Thank you so much for that. I think it is in a sense a call for arms, because I think all of us have to now jump in and do more, I think, with whatever talents and skills we have. And it would be so beautiful if you could have multidisciplinary, groups and projects that work for the same goal, because we bring in different skill sets. I think Sriharsha talked about it in a previous conversation. Yeah. So Sriharsha, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, talking about this idea of conservation and how we should like pause and think back, like how Vikram mentioned, and continuing from there, art is also a space which allows one to fail. It is very similar to a scientist doing their experiment, right? So there is no today in our fast world. Another problem that I see is that the necessity of an external validation, and it is so necessary because we are moving fast and we have to really progress. Otherwise, we have a fear of failure, and we have a lot of insecurity. Art is a space where that insecurity can be gone, and it provides you a safe space where you can fail, and you can still explore though you fail. So this process of doing it again, repetitiveness, and allowing to fail also builds a lot of curiosity, and also it also opens up new avenues every time you try to repeat something or look at it in a deeper sense. It provides a new avenue on how you are looking at it, and thereby helps you to understand something a lot more, and also question it. Again, like Vikram said, there is a space for questioning, there is a space for understanding, and there is no need to quickly cancel something or quickly dismiss something just because we are afraid of it or we don't approve of it or anything like that. So that is an advantage that art space provides when it comes to conservation or understanding certain concepts that we don't understand, or we don't even know. That's something which art can provide.
I just love it. Vikram spoke about tapping into memory and using practices that we already have and maybe are losing now. Abhisheka was talking about just conservation practice. How can we use theater to enrich and take conservation concepts to the public? Whereas you are talking about the process itself, where in the process of finding something new, how do you use the arts to kind of get over the fear of failure? Or it's actually a life technique, which I think we can use in any domain, but also in the domain of conservation. So you have memory, you have technique, and you have advocacy, right? So already in just with 3 experiences of 3 people who've worked with theater and conservation, you're looking at the multiple ways in which any form of art, maybe not just theater, can intervene in conservation. So, I mean, I would like to take a step on the pause button, and I request anybody who's watching right now, or people who are going to watch in the future the YouTube video, can at least all of us do this small exercise, which I find extremely useful just to set the space when I start any workshop. So everybody, big eyes, please do this with me. Big eyes, big eyes. Come on, Sriharsha, you can make it bigger. Yes, go for it. Good job. Okay, small eyes. Small eyes, small eyes, everybody, small eyes, big eyes, small eyes, big ears. Can we have like lovely big elephant ears? Yes, yes. And big heart. Okay. And then now you're going to bat your hair like you have like something in it, and breathe out as you do so. Yeah, shake it out. I mean, I knew I was working with theater practitioners. Immediately they take it and they take it away. Okay. Okay. I always say in anything, I do this with politicians, with police people, with conservationists, with scientists, with children. So we need to look at the space we have around us, whatever space we are in, with big eyes, and then look with a very keen gaze. What is it that we have here? Analyze it, and then listen to each other. And that's something I think the arts teach, because we're always tapping into stimuli around us. We're listening, we're watching around us. And above all, with an open heart and no judgment. Just throw the judgment out of the room, out of your hair, out of your head for a few minutes, for an hour. When I'm in this room working with you, can we suspend judgment, right? So these are things that we can use to clear the space in any conversation. And I'm sure there's techniques like that you guys use even before you begin the journey into telling a story or telling someone about, telling children, telling adults, working with different stakeholders about the space in hand. You're all creating the curiosity as well as that non-judgmental safe space. And I think that is such a huge advantage that the arts have. We know, even as a Bharatanatyam dancer, when you just touch the floor, you have to set the space before you begin the conversation. Right? And there's so many things like this that you use, I'm sure, when you start those conversations. And I would love, this is just an ad hoc question. It's just inspired by what I'm hearing from you guys. Any technique or anything that, practical, technique that you could share in your journey that, about using theater and the arts in conservation.
I'll break the silence again. Okay. So a lot of times I think people's assumption of theater means performance. And that's something that needs to slowly move away, saying that theater is not performance. One performance is one part of any art form. It could be a painter, it could be a dancer. All artists, performance only a part of it. And theater in today's time is applicable, and the journey is longer if it is more applied than performative. If you're performing, there's only few people involved, but if you are applying it, you have an entire gamut of people being a part of it. And that could be corporate, it could be adults, it could be children. Like I can work with 100 people and that's still theater. And that's a slow notion. I think all of us, like Harsha, Abhisheka, all of us have been fighting, saying that there is a notion that, oh, I watched a play and that's theater. No, that is one type of theater. And if you go to an exhibition, you see a painting, oh, that's an exhibition, I paid a ticket. That's one type of painting. There are other forms of applied thing, and one is saying that, okay, now with applied, so I do this exercise generally where I notion people, I mean, the more serious people, because I believe children need to laugh, adults needs to pause and reflect. And a childhood without laughter is a lot of baggage for the child. And that's one way to look at it. And that's because a lot of adults, we are only unblocking our childhood memories. And art is one part of it in a journey part. So now this is an exercise that I know I use in every workshop and it works. Now just take a very serious face. Put your hand up. And keep seriously, put your hand up. Very up. Stretch it up. We fail to yawn as adults. We fail to look at our basic expressions like yawning, coughing, sneezing as, oh my God, I shouldn't do this in public. But these are our expressions. This is what makes us us. And yawning is a great, with theater, saying that you unloosen your body. You could be a CEO, you could be a manager, you could be talking to an audience, you could be in the audience. But once you do this, your energy level goes up at least 20 to 30%. And that's mine.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Anything else that you guys would like to share about your practices? Because ultimately it's the practice that, that's fascinating and that works. And then we'll move to, there are a couple of questions that have come in and we could move to that.
One thing I can tell about theater practice as a practice is that it brings this certain kind of, it is about, playing with each other. Mostly, I mean, that's the theater that I have been practicing, and I'm sure any other art form which involves a group of people who have to come together and practice uh, creates an environment which is playful. At least theater does that, and that's the aim of theater. And this playfulness will bring out the child in you. I mean, whatever the baggage that you carry, that you have to keep it out of the room. Otherwise, you cannot play with each other, right? So it breaks the hierarchies. In a theater space today, at least when I look at the contemporary practitioners, the hierarchies are broken because of these things, because of making the space more playful, and because hierarchies are broken, judgment is gone. So when you are having to save yourself, you cannot judge others. So that's the best part of theater that is there for me, and that really takes away a lot of everyday problems or tension that I have. I'm sure it does to so many other people, and brings in this kind of a very curious and very light body, which can fly to any extent. That's what theater has done to me and to many others that I have seen.
Thank you so much, Abhisheka.
I'll just add a
Vanga,
little
Vanga.
bit because Vikram and Harsha have already spoken quite a bit. I think something that I am trying to break in theater is, I grew up thinking, to be in theater, you need to be very outgoing and extrovert. You need to have, you need to know how to say long dialogues. And I shied away from it for years because I mean, I'm not a very outgoing person, but then I still want to be part of the performance field. So I think when I work with children, I'm quite conscious about that not all kids are comfortable being these extroverts. So I do sometimes, use movements that everybody is comfortable with. Also a lot of nature observation that we get children to do, just observe an insect or the way a leaf moves and see if you can move like that. And because I personally when I've been part of dance theater performances, I'm somebody who prefers doing some performances where there's no dialogue, because I'm really not comfortable with. But I think what is important is that in performance art, there should be a space for everybody, not just people who are comfortable to be in front of a crowd. And that is where, at least in my nature education, I'm trying to do that. Everybody should be able to do art.
So true. And this is absolutely the basis of inclusion, right? That all voices are heard, the softer ones are heard. And what I love is also how you can use silence so powerfully. And so much of conservation is about watching, is about being in whatever nature surrounds you and watching. I just love that. Yeah, so I think we can go for a couple of questions now. I'm so happy there are questions. Sometimes it's traumatic, like nobody's asking any questions. So good job. Thank you so much. Samira, would you like to read it, or shall I read it?
Yeah, can I go ahead? I just wanted to also say a couple of things before we go into the question and answer session that are relevant to our panel. First of all, I just wanted to share with the audience that Sangeeta, who is a wonderful moderator today, is herself an accomplished artist. And many of us in the field have worked with her or have seen her performances even though those of us in the conservation field. And she works with marginalized and underprivileged communities using arts in education, empowerment, and conflict resolution across 30 countries. And she's been able to cross boundaries of subjects and topics and work in an interdisciplinary manner. That is what makes her the perfect moderator for such a panel. But I also wanted to point out, not to lose out on institutional memory, that in 2017, SCCS hosted an art performance, a theater performance called How to Be a Fig. And every single person in the audience, I'm sure, will not disagree that they had goosebumps. It was the very first time that a conference on conservation science had such such a performance or anything to do with the arts. And some of us here listening and part of the panel as well were part of that performance. And what was brilliant about it was that, like, to draw upon some of the things that you all said today, was that the people who participated in it were students and persons from very different non-science backgrounds who had completely no background in theater. But they all came together to translate this interaction between figs and fig wasps into a very beautiful production that stays with all of us who saw it till today. So I just wanted to bring that back into SCCS. And I'll read out now the questions that have come in. The first question is from Anand to the entire panel. Theatre already finds it difficult to find funders and patrons in general. Does theatre for conservation suffer from the same crisis, and how do you find opportunities and funds to develop, practice, and disseminate your productions? So, anyone? Anybody from the panel can answer.
Sangeeta, maybe you should start with your experience and then we can follow.
So I think I've been working using the arts and community for more than 2 decades. And I've seen over the years how much more legitimacy we have now, because arts practitioners have been fighting, not just for the financial aspect of getting paid, but also just the respect that the arts does have something powerful and important to contribute in this conversation of making the world a more just and equal space for all beings, right? The 2 tools that I really rely on, one is, of course, evaluation tools, because everybody wants metrics, right? And there are many evaluation tools that are now available for artists, because it's so hard to measure happiness or inclusion. But there are certain ways to do it. And that's something I've been training myself in, because that stays and rest is a validation. And the second, very quickly, because I really want to hear what you guys have to say. The second is just doing it over the years. You do it again and again, and you convince people because they're watching you. And that's the power of the arts. No metric can be equal to that. But I do agree, and this is something Abhisheka brought up in our last conversation, is that there has to be way more legitimacy. And one way could be to include theatre and communication in, let's say, a degree in conservation. So right at the beginning, in the learning space, when students are coming fresh into the project, you are plugging this idea into them that communication and conversation is something the arts do very well, and from a space that is both emotional and rational, and you need both. Yeah.
I'll add on to that. So what happens a lot of times, only productions need funders. I mean, a lot of times to sustain it is applied art. And I think as practitioners, if you think of what applied theatre and what spaces it can be used, it does help a lot of us survive. I think a lot of us have been surviving on the applied theatre part. And productions, yes, will have to be, it's a front end. But applied art is where the funding or the revenue is, where we all generate for ourselves. And that's why we sustain. And that is something that each artist and many of the artists are sustaining on applied. When I say applied, it could be taking it to communities. It could be applying it into the educational system. It could be like, I apply it in the management principle. I talk to college students and saying that how storytelling is important. And when I started storytelling 2011-12 professionally, people said, oh, this is a birthday party word. And they say, even today, when you say storytelling, they say, oh, what do you do? When you say stand-up comedy, they say, wow. And over time today, I know a lot of people have taken up storytelling as an applied theatre, and I still hold on to say that, like any other form, theatre today, each practitioner has to find out what is my applied form. And that is a longer journey, and that is where the communities will embrace this. I think when we can find that map with organizations and communities, and that is sustainable. Because every organization also, the reverse thing is also a thing. The funding, the organization where we work with also is fighting a battle. And when these two can map, I think that's where it's a longer journey. And adding to Sangeeta, just staying there itself is half the battle fought. I think that's where I think as practitioners to say that this is my work and we've been doing it for many years, and people will look up and have a conversation.
Can we take another question from the audience? Unless Abhisheka or Sriharsha, you have to want to add anything. Yeah, so Malaika Chawla asks, how do you be honest to your work and the process of creating without being overwhelmed by the thought of how it would be eventually received or what is expected out of you? And I think this is an especially relevant question when you are converting science into art and were concerned about how the scientists might perceive the end result, perhaps. So yeah, please.
I'll take this because we just did a production. It's always at least when the theater that I've been doing, it's always the case that that fear of how it will be perceived, or I won't call it fear, but the perception that we have about how our piece or our art will be seen is always there. But that is not so overwhelming because at the end of the day, we are many people in the room and we hold each other's space, and we are our own guides, and not only that, but also we have different modes and techniques proven over time to say that okay, if we do this, it will be perceived in a certain way. So it's not an overwhelming thing, but it is definitely always true there. It is always there. And also, as I said, in theater, what happens is most of the times, at least when I talk about a performance which is happening, a production, what happens is the performers have to be in the moment. Otherwise, and they have to be playing with each other. Otherwise, the show can't move on. So when you are in the moment and playing, it is not possible to think of what is how you are being perceived. So yeah, that's how it works, and it's also because of a lot of practice. We practice a lot. It's not like as Vikram also said, performance is just a part of it. It's just one of the days when we call different people and show our work, but the work is going on for a long time. So yeah.
I'd actually ask Abhisheka to respond because as an artist, I know very often I don't find legitimacy in a tech space or a space of science. A lot of people say, "Oh, aapka dance itna sundar hai," so you're stuck in this whole sundar, beautiful thing, which is very painful. But I'd like to reverse the question and say, because you are a scientist, right? And you brought arts into your space, you married your two passions. In some spaces, does it destroy your legitimacy as a scientist? Because it's the same question that is asked, because the result is so different from expected. Does it kind of play with your legitimacy as a scientist when you use the arts?
Okay, it's a very challenging space for me to, when you are in the science community as well as the art, to bring both together. It's extremely challenging. So I think the way I work is sometimes say I can give this example of this performance I was part of called the Mookie, where it was an abstract piece of performance, but it really touched the audience. Like people who saw the performance, there was no story behind it. It was so abstract, but we also saw audience who were in tears because they would come and tell us that, there was something about this performance that touched us. Now, I cannot use something like that for a conservation message because somewhere, when you need to bring science to people, you need to be much more clearer as to what you're trying to say. So even with visual arts, this is the challenge I face. I do a lot of nature illustrations, but to be honest, that is not something that will bring me personal satisfaction because I'm just representing what is there in nature. It's more about my skills than bringing out my feelings into it. But then I do know that I cannot put up an abstract art show, like an installation art piece, say in a village or to an audience who don't understand modern art or whatever. So I need to work with my audience. So when it comes to taking conservation messages to people, I need to always, more than what is it that makes me happy, I need to think about what works for that particular audience. So then I'll have to compromise on my own interest, and then because ultimately it's about changing the way people think and behave. So yeah, this is how I have to compromise at some places. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. You wanted to
We
add
have time
something?
for one more question, Samira.
Yes, exactly. And I think you might be the right person to start off answering this, but it's slightly related to what Abhisheka was saying and what you said earlier about tools to evaluate effectiveness. Sai asks, how does one evaluate effectiveness or the impact of an act or performance in when it's related to conservation, for example?
I'd like to extend the question, because of something very important that Vikram also said, which is a successful collaboration with the conservation space for me is not an act or a performance. There are very often workshops that we facilitate as artists. It could be workshops with the community. It could be education with children. And I think I'd like to extend the question to cover evaluation of any program using theater and conservation so that everybody can respond to that. And I would really like, the others to start off, because it's important to know that our work has impact. And I'm very curious to know, how does one know? And one metric Abhisheka already mentioned, she said the audience was in tears. That is actually when our audience observations, when we do evaluation of audience and spectators support, that is an important metric to see how many people were moved by your performance, if it's a performance. But there are other metrics that, I'm happy to share, but I'd love to hear from everybody first.
There's no direct answer to metrics in art at all. The word of art and metrics sometimes is an oxymoron, but what we can look at is art will definitely work. It takes time because the person who's doing it also is on a journey. So it's a two-way journey. So the facilitator is also in the process and the audience is also going through a process. Time is one factor that could be looked at. I'm saying how long, for example, if you finish a project or a thing or a workshop, what is the impact? For example, if the participants are going back and applying it in their work, and the extended amount of time in which the subject or the objective of the facilitation or the performance has been working. For example, like how Samira remembers the production 2017, I also was part of the audience. Even now, that isn't a memory, that's the impact we're talking about. So instead of quantitative, there's a lot of qualitative metrics that could be derived, because art cannot be compared even between two facilitators of art. So the same subject can be handled by different ways.
Absolutely. Is there anything else, Sri Harsha, Abhisheka, like how have your programs being evaluated, or is there any way you've done this?
Yeah, again, metrics is a very tricky thing, even for me. For a performance, at least in a way, whether it is a performance or a workshop or you're working or a storytelling session or any such form of expression using theater, it's a shared space, right? So basically the idea of theater itself, is about sharing the space and responding to each other's energies. It is not not about doing anything in isolation. So it is everyone coming together, not just the person who is facilitating it, not just the storyteller or not just the performer. It is about even the audiences coming together, or children in the space. The space changes, right? If Vikram is telling a story to children, it's a different space. And if Vikram is telling a story to adults, then the space changes. So also the performers and facilitators will have their own strategies, and based on their training, their practice, form different strategies on how to effectively communicate what we want to communicate to our audiences, and also bring about that exchange of energy. That is when people are moved with your performance. So that is probably another way of looking at things, and knowing within that whatever you have performed has been effective, and people have received it. I think so.
Okay.
Just to add to it, so again, as scientists, we always look for evidence. So, so a couple of things I've done for evaluation is like even when we did the FIG performance, at the end of the performance, we had a very tiny feedback form, that people could fill in. So we did receive a lot of feedback about the performance through that. And then when I actually, when I have long-term engagement with people, especially the Tamil Nadu workshop that I did a pre-workshop and post-workshop survey to see if there's been any change in knowledge and attitude of the students towards their local biodiversity. So I took up some kind of formal evaluation to do.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time. Yeah, I think the most important thing I've learned in evaluation is the fact that you just count. First of all, people want numbers, especially if it's corporate funded, and many of our projects are corporate funded. You want to know the number of participants, right? Number of people who engaged. If it's a performance, you know the number of spectators, you know the number that came up. If you're doing interactive theater, the number of people that were induced to come up and work in the space. You also have simple qualitative metrics that you can use in terms of pre and post, like, Abhisheka does the pre and post evaluation, where you can see if knowledge transformation has, like, knowledge sharing as well as a transformation of their habitual, of behavior transformation. There are simple pre and post workshops. If it's a longer project, it's not just a single intervention, there are many evaluation strategies that are being used currently to evaluate and assess the impact of a project, and some of these tools we are developing in order to assess the impact, like the emotional impact, and not just the numbers, number crunching, that is also important. I'd also like to say that I'm emphasizing this because all the panelists again said it. It's not about performance. It is not just about making a piece of theater. Artists can intervene in conservation spaces in multiple ways. And some of the ways actually I've been working, and the first way I actually stepped into the conservation space was to do workshops on gender for NCF, right? So it's also that among scientists, among people who work in conservation agencies, they want a safe space to work, or they want to be better and more productive in what they do, and more equal in addressing the needs of their stakeholders, for example. So I'd like to, I don't know if we have time for another question. I did see one pop up, but I'd like to emphasize the fact that when you think about theater and conservation, please do not think about only performance. Theater practitioners have multiple skills to work not just with your conservation community, but also the scientists and the people, the field staff, the people running the projects. To run projects more effectively, you have to work together as a group, and theater practitioners often are very good at building teams, teamwork development, as well as addressing social justice issues and issues of community. So I think that's where we need to leave this space now, because our time is up. Anybody would like to add a few words to this?
Sangeeta, I'm afraid we're out of time, but the questions can be answered by all of you on the Slack workspace. I would really encourage you to do that, because there are some unanswered questions that can be addressed there. And we hope that our participants will be able to engage with you in person next year. And fingers crossed for that. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. Vikram, Abhisheka, Sriharsha, Sangeeta.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was
Thank you so
fantastic
much.
having you all.
Bye-bye. See you next year.
Thank you. Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Please join our poster
Thank you,
session. Yeah.